Játék Pelletier sé ma idéskígyin initially Billigana Bush's Chin, Keen Lachini Dashache, Billigana Dashanoy. Welcome back to Resball, where this time we're going to ask, what can Jaden Ivey turn into? As I said in the last pod, Pistons pod that Andy and I did, I wanted to look at some comparisons, and especially for Ivey, it seems like he has a broader spectrum of outcomes. So let's get into those right about now. Andy, welcome back. Let everybody know where they can find you before we start this Jaden Ivey discourse.
You can find me on Twitter at D_D_Pistons_fan.
Well, Andy and I have been talking about this beforehand. I let him know, as I said last time, I really wanted to go and look at, okay, who are Jaden Ivey's comps in terms of their first 3 years, production, all that stuff, their role, who they are, and where they kind of ended up with their respective careers and whatnot. I did look at guys in the past. I'm talking like pre 2012, which is probably like a big shift in the NBA. That's like when the Warriors came up and the 3-point shot became more of an emphasis for every last single team. And it wasn't just the weird Warriors. And, I remember back in the day, for me at least, in the 2000s, 2010s, it was all those Stan Van Gundy Magic teams. Those are the first teams for me watching where people emphasize like, oh, you shoot threes, and then Dwight's there. So 2012, I did kind of look at some guys before then, but then I really didn't think it was apropos because before that too, there were a little bit more like ISO scorers, and if you wanted to look at combo guards too, which is what Ivy is projecting as, I think still it's unfair because the combo guard before pre 12 is a little bit more score heavy, a little bit more selfish and usage heavy, which Ivy's numbers don't track that way. And I'll be the first to say he's not a selfish player either. He's, continued to show that he is unselfish, whether it's, saying whatever role I want to do, and most specifically on the court, being able to continue to pass at an above average rate. So I really did stick to current players in the NBA. I came up with 4 names. A couple of them I've said before in this podcast, but they all do play in the NBA. And with the exception of 2 of them, they're pretty contemporary to Ivy. 2 of them are a little bit older vets. The other are, again, pretty close to Ivy's draft class. And you have any idea who these guys are?
Tell me one, and then I'll guess a couple because before we started, I already guessed a few, and I was not close. So
Well, let me go to some shot charts here. So we'll start with Ivy stuff here. I'm putting up Ivy shot chart here if you're not watching this on YouTube. And the guy who I first thought of, and when I was like, you know what, I could see Jaden Ivey turning into this guy, and that was Karis LeVert. That was the first guy that I thought of. Because when I dove into LeVert's numbers, I'm like, man, he still like scores. It's clear like teams still used him coming off the bench. Sometimes he started, but as his career went on, he mainly became a bench scoring guy. And then when I looked at the shot chart, I'm like, yeah, even though you see here, again, if you're watching this on YouTube, blue is cold, white is neutral, red is hot, meaning you're good. Ivy's red last year. This is a shot chart from last year. Even though it's only 30 games, it's at least indicating where his game is going. Light blue at the rim, red from pretty much everywhere in 3, and doesn't take that many shots in the mid range, except for maybe that like runner floater in the restricted area in the paint. And then you look at Karis LeVert's shot chart, and he's a little bit above league average at the rim, which is what you want Ivy to be. And as a veteran, you would think he would be. And then the 3-point shot kind of cools off, like pretty league average from right wing, a little bit above league average from top of the key. Blue below league average, but still 33% from left wing. And then from the corners, he's above league average on both of those sides. And then again, nothing really in the mid range except for there in the paint. 40 shots last year for Karis LeVert. Ivy took 33 shots there in the paint just in his 30 games. And Karis LeVert took 260 shots at the rim. Ivy took 197 even in those 30 games. Karis ended up shooting 60.2% at the rim, Ivy 54.8%. But again, this is where the difference of a vet who's been around the league 9 years versus Ivy who's just in his 3rd year. Again, maybe by year 9, this is what Ivy looks like, where it's like it's still pretty average from 3, good in the corners, but the main thing is he gets to the rim and he finishes above the league average. So that's my first point of comparison, is like maybe the reason they brought in Levert is to try and guide Ivy this way, but also maybe have Karras be like, do this, don't do that. What do you think of the first point of comparison for Ivy?
Um, no disrespect to Karis LeVert, but that would be disappointing for Ivy. But we only saw his 3-point shooting for 30 games. So you can't be sold on his shooting. And Karras has had a season where he shot the ball very well, but for his career, he hasn't. And I think of Ivy as being much better at attacking the rim. But if you attack the rim and can't finish, does it really matter that you can attack the rim? So it's, when you think about it, it's actually a pretty good comp. Like I don't want that to be an accurate comp, but it's a good comp.
Yeah, for the record, I don't want it to be an accurate comp too, but I'm thinking of realistic outcomes where this one's more of, he leans into his scoring. He still ends up being a pretty good passer, which I think Ivy is already a better passer than Karis LeVert. We can put that in there. But like the team brought him in again to play point guard, shooting guard. LeVert's been taller, so he's been more small forward, shooting guard, but same type of thing. If the shooting never really rounds out and stays where it's at, then this is the kind of player that we're looking at. And I want to give this we gave Andy a peek into this. I did want to dive into Ivy's numbers going back into college, just so we can again track the shooting and track where he's been. So remember, Ivy played 2 years at Purdue. First year as a freshman, 11.1 points per game, 39.9% from the entire field, which was really held back by his 3-point shot, 25.8% of 4.2 3-point attempts per game. I remember writing for Detroit Bad Boys back then about him after his freshman year and being like, this is not somebody you want to pair with Cade because of that 3-point shot, despite the athleticism and all that. Only 1.9 assists then as well. But then as a sophomore came in and ran the show pretty much for that Purdue team, 17.3 points per game, 4.9 rebounds. He's always been a pretty good rebounder for a guard. And then 3.1 assists and shooting splits for 53.1% from 2-point range, up that 3-point percentage, 10 whole percentage points to 35.8%. And then the free throw numbers have been mid 70s, like 72 to 74% both years. So even then, the 3-point and the shot at the free throw line, we're like, okay, these indicate at least average. And the big jump between freshman and sophomore year indicated like, okay, this guy can get better, and seems like he's turning the corner. And as we talked about last time, the true shooting percentage always kind of indicated in the NBA like there's something off here because he's never been league average across a full season. First year at Purdue, 49.7% true shooting percentage. That's a freshman. Again, it really showed that no matter what the athleticism said, no matter how many rims this guy rocked, he really needed a jumper or something else to make him have like something that's other than just abysmal true shooting. And then gets that 3-point shot right, gets a little bit more to his game, and 57.9% true shooting. So it was a gigantic turnaround from being below average dude and true shooting to be like, he's just one of these guys that needs the ball, scores a lot, but like, are you really going to win anything with him? To like, okay, this is a real dude that worked on his jumper, still very good athlete, and maybe he can play some point guard. Who knows? Pistons draft him. And again, go over these stats real quick, just one more time. 16.3 points per game as a rookie. 3-point numbers are 34.3% from three. Sophomore, 15.4% points per game. 3-point numbers in that second year for Jaden Ivey, 33.6% from three, and then just 30 games. This third year, this past season, 17.6 points per game, and then 40.9% from 3-point range. And the assists have always been really good in the NBA so far. 5.2 assists per game as a rookie for Ivy. 3.8 second year, and then last year in those 30 games, 4 assists. I mean, he's already averaging 4.4 assists per game. So I did want to start with this because this is my thought of looking at this. Is this is a guy who went from being thought of as, oh, he's an athlete, he can score, but I don't know about his jumper. Doesn't look like it's ever going to get there. And then it turned around. And even in the NBA, even though we've been still like, I don't know, it's 35.2% across these 3 years. And even if you want to throw out the 30 game sample size, because you're going to say, like, it's too small, it's not even half a season. Well, if you look at it just in the first 2 years, 33.9% from three, that's not bad. And that's definitely not bad for somebody who is still developing as a shooter. I mean, that's probably better than somebody like Marcus Smart, who did take a lot of threes in his career. And in the first 2 years, it wasn't like that either. So it still does indicate, like, hey, it's getting better. It's what my draft co host Jam would always say is a capable shooter. And then a couple that with the passing, which is always there. It's not quite at the level of being a point guard. Sure, I'll give that to you, but it still does indicate that, yo, this guy can pass the rock. And he's averaged 22.7% assist percentage. Well, his turnover rate continues to go down and not be a thing where he's just wasting the ball. And he's been able to play some point guard last year, mainly been at the shooting guard position. It's a difficult profile, wouldn't you say, Andy? That was the hardest part for me of like trying to find guys that all of these things ring true of, like, yes, we know they can score. Yes, we know they're a pretty good athlete. Their jumper seems to be something that is going to be good. But 3 years in, you have to account for the Karras one of, like, okay, if this seems to be capable and average, like, what does that look like? It does end up looking like a Karras LeVert, but Karras doesn't fit Ivy. Number one, he's taller. Number two, he's never been the passer that Ivy is. He doesn't have the vision, and he's definitely not the athlete that an Ivy is, so it doesn't quite fit. Three other guys that I looked at, you have any idea all that stuff that I just laid out, anybody else that kind of fits that profile?
Jordan Clarkson?
I did look at Jordan Clarkson, but it did not end up being Jordan Clarkson. Let's go back to the shot chart. After Karras, I went to Cole Anthony because Cole Anthony's in kind of a similar boat to Ivy, where he's probably the other side of the coin, whereas Ivy is shooting guard that can play some point guard. Cole's thought of as more as the point guard who can play some shooting guard. And again, their shot charts. This is, I don't want to say it's a bad outcome per se, but I think it is closer to like the Karras, maybe a little less than that. And Cole has never really been given the starting opportunities that Ivy has. Still below league average at the rim, 56.1% at the rim on 180 shots last year. And then the 3-point shot from the corners, it's pretty good, but he doesn't take that many. 110 shots from the left wing, 33.6%, 35.2% from top of the key, and then 26.2% from the right wing. This one didn't land for me, even though, again, it's very similar to Ivy. And if you projected it out to 70 games, like Ivy's shot chart might look like this. We already saw his rim finishing was worse than Cole's at 54.8%, but he took more shots at the rim than Cole did, even though Cole played a full season. But again, there's not that many shots in the mid range here. The ones that Ivy took the most were in the paint, 33, and then from the right baseline, 24 shots. And for Cole Anthony, the ones he took the most are from both baselines, 37 on the left, 39 on the right, and then 62 in the paint. And I think Cole does project way more on the nose for an Ivy comp, even though, again, this is somebody that probably I can already see Andy is like, please don't let it be Cole Anthony, because he's had similar efficiency issues, even though he's been pretty good as a passer. He's continued to be a good scorer. I mean, last year was the only season where he didn't crack 11 points per game, and that's because the Magic, for whatever weird reason, like didn't play him as much as they wanted to. This is where I will give Cole a pass because I can already hear people out there be like, "Well, Cole Anthony's trash." Cole Anthony is not trash. I think it's more the Magic got and Anthony Black, and it's clear they want to play guys that are like 6'7" and above, like everybody in their lineup. And they kind of just drafted as many guards and signed as many guards as they could throughout the year. But across 5 years, Cole Anthony, 12.5 points per game, 4.3 rebounds, 3.8 assists. 46.3% from 2 point range, 34.5% from 3 point range, and then 84.7% from the free throw line. All of that translates out into a 53.3% true shooting. Again, Cole Anthony, similarly to Ivy, the first 3 years, 49.6% true shooting. First year, 51.9% true shooting. Second year, 57% in the third year for Cole Anthony. Let's go back to Ivy and see what his true shooting numbers were in those first 3 years. 52.8% in his first year. So he beat Cole there. 53.6% his second year. Can beat him there a little bit again. But then in the third year, with just those 30 games, 56.9%. So it does track a little bit there. And since then, Cole Anthony, 54.5%, fourth year, and then this last year, 53.1%. Another guy whose assist percentage is good, 24.4%. Usage does track a lot like Ivy too, where it's like in the mid 20s, 24, 25, 21, 23, 24, which is pretty much what Ivy's had, like 25, 24, 26, in those ranges. And the 3 point attempt rate is also pretty similar, 37.3% 3 point attempt rate for Cole Anthony across 5 years. Jaden Ivey's 3 point attempt rate is 36.9% or 36.3%. Free throw attempt rate for Ivy, 32.7%. And then for Cole Anthony across these 5 years is 26.2%. So the free throw attempt rate sticks out already. Again, the assist percentage pretty similar. I do think that Ivy has him already beat on the 2 point percentages, which if you looked at, I don't think Ivy's ever been below 50%, and Cole's been below 50% 4 out of his 5 years in the NBA. So that is one like definitive thing. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. Ivy has been below 50% all 3 years. This is me misremembering everything. Well, this is the one where I really had trouble like splitting the difference, but there's a clear difference. What do you think that is? Because I have my answer. I would be interested to see what your answer is, because neither of us think it's Cole Anthony, but it was interesting to find like statistically there are a lot of similarities between Cole Anthony and Jaden Ivey.
So what was your question for me?
Like, what's the difference between the two? Because again, just from a statistical analysis point of view, and if you look at them in the first 3 years, there are a lot of similarities, but what's the difference between the two that would make you definitively say, like, no, Jaden Ivey is not Cole Anthony, or not going to turn into Cole Anthony?
Well, Cole Anthony scored more in his earlier seasons, right? It's only recently he scored less.
Yeah. And again, like you can't really put that in there because it's more due to like Orlando being like, no, 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 we're going in a different direction rather than like him being bad.
Yeah, no, with that, I definitely think it's just the way the roster constructed, getting Franz, getting Paulo, everything kind of changing in the direction on what they're doing. I would just have to say like the free throw attempt rate and attacking the basket would be the biggest differentiator for me.
Dribbling, I think, is what it is. So I didn't just look at this from a statistical standpoint. I first looked at the stats, and then after that, I just watched like film after film after film after film. And I mean, obviously, we saw 30 games of Ivy. I watched Cole Anthony. He dribbles way, way more than an Ivy does, for sure. Ivy does a lot more things off ball than a Cole Anthony probably has ever done. That's probably also why he's in Orlando kind of out, where like we want to give Paulo and Franz the ball. Even a Jalen Suggs does more things off ball than Cole Anthony does. Cole Anthony is your traditional like 6 man or combo guard, as it was known in the 2000s, who dribbles the ball, can pass, but mainly scores. So that's the big difference. I know usage, like most people would just look at the usage numbers and say like, oh, they're the similar players, but it's like, no, look at the actions that they run. Cole Anthony brings up the ball probably like 60 to 70% of the time he's actually in the game. With Ivy, it's probably like 30%. He really didn't bring the ball up that much, and he's not the one setting the action. Normally, he's the one finishing the play. And especially when Cade Cunningham is in, Ivy did so much more off ball. So even though there is a lot of similarities here, and I think if the team does lean more towards into Ivy being the point guard, I mean, number one, they would have to take the ball away from Cade in order to do that, which I don't foresee them doing at all, even though they're going to do the the split of the two of them, and Ivy's probably going to run that second unit more. It's not like this at all. Even with who they have on the team, Karis LeVert, Asar Thompson, Ron Holland, like they have enough other guys to give the ball to where Ivy can still do a lot of off ball stuff in the second unit. So, and I do think the ball kind of stuck to Cole Anthony a little bit more. I know what the assist numbers say, but then again, in my film study, it just seemed like Ivy was more willing to share the sugar and keep things moving. Whereas Cole, it's like, we're running this play for you. You set it up and you finish. So I think that's the main difference between the two. And why I say Cole is like the other side of the same coin. It's like, yes, point guard, shooting guard for Cole Anthony. He runs the show and sets it up and gets everything moving. Whereas Ivy is more shooting guard, point guard. He is off ball, moving action, can score and do some setup, but that's not like his main thing. This is where it gets interesting. I do not know. I cannot tell you how I found Ivy's pretty much one-to-one comparison. Again, I don't know how this came about, but I guarantee you're not going to guess who it is. It did, again, very similar in age, around the Cole Anthony draft, another guard, not somebody that's taller than Ivy, like a Karis LeVert, probably around the same size. Do you have any idea who that would be?
I have no idea.
I give you another hint. I believe he's from the same draft. Yeah, no. Let's see. I think he is from the same draft class as Cole Anthony, because again, the same guy's been in the league for 5 years.
Cole Anthony. What year was that draft?
2020. And I could be wrong on this, but
Was that the Killian Hayes draft?
what's it? It might have been. I don't know.
I don't know.
Colin Sexton.
Oh,
First off, your reaction to Jaden Ivey's most likely outcome is Colin Sexton. What would your reaction to that be?
that's not bad. I mean, really, that's not a bad. The more I think about it, it's like a pretty good comp. Um, how many seasons has Sexton been in? But how long was he in Utah for?
Maybe this is where I got it wrong. Maybe he's been in there 6. He's been in Utah the last 3 seasons, I believe. We'll get into his numbers here real quick, but just to break down the shot chart for this again. Again, if you're not watching this on YouTube, remember Ivy, it's mainly shots at the rim, some in the paint there, like the floater areas, like what I like to call it, but then more from 3 where he's shooting very well from 3. Colin Sexton, same shot profile here. It's around the around the 3-point area. I mean, there's only one area where he's blue. He's red from left corner. He's red from the left wing. He's orange, which is 37.5% from top of the key, 29.5% from the right wing, which is the only area he's really bad from 3, and then red again from the right corner. 36 shots from right corner, 29 shots from right corner, or left corner, 36 shots, right corner, 29 shots. So even though he takes them, it's not like his main thing, which again is the same thing with Ivy, only 19 from each corner. And we don't anticipate Ivy to be a corner 3-point shooter. That's really the role more of like the guy that's really good at being a spot up shooter, or like Tobias. Tobias really has been the main corner 3-point shooter so far. In this regime, it's what you would ideally want like a Ron and a Sar to do, because you know they can do dynamic things off ball. But as a shooter, you want to keep things simple and where they can attack with their athleticism and stuff. And normally it's the taller like forwards that do those corner things. So same thing with Sexton and Ivy. They don't do that. 91 shots for Colin Sexton from left wing, 64 from top of the key, and then 78 from the right wing. And that tracks pretty much like Ivy, where left and right wings where he took the most, 50 from left wing, 45 from right wing, and then 35 from top of the key, and shot well. And even if those numbers went down, again, Ivy was red from all of those spots there, from left wing, from top of the key, and from right wing. He was 40% or better from all those 3 spots. If those average out at the end of the season, I don't know that he shoots 47.3% from the left wing, but I could see him shooting 37.5% from top of the key and better than 29.5% from the right. right wing as well. So it's like, okay, you can see those numbers kind of balance out, and they're not these gaudy 3-point numbers. Before we started recording, Andy was guessing guys, and he said like Anthony Simons, and I've never considered somebody like that because Simons has such a high volume of threes that like it would take a monumental leap from Ivy in his attempts to do that. Sexton is very much in range there, and same thing, no shots really in the mid range. The main shot he took in that area is in the paint, 91 shots. He shot 53.8%. Again, that's something Ivy could get better at. And then at the rim, Colin Sexton, that's the shot he took the most, 383 shots at the rim, where he shot 55.6%, which seems to be like an Ivy thing across a full season, 54.8% just in those 30 games, where it's like, okay, I know we think he can be better than that, but realistically, across an 82 game schedule, like that's probably what Ivy would shoot. What do you think this all equals out into, Andy, with in terms of like the production and the true shooting percentage and the things we've been harping on?
So you mean how do I feel in terms of Ivy becoming Sexton and
Well,
matching?
first, just looking at Sexton's shot chart, like how efficient do you think he is? Do you think this is a positive player that you want?
Um, and maybe this is part of the reason why I didn't even think of Colin Sexton in terms of a comp. Like for the last few seasons, I've been so baffled by what Utah is doing.
Yeah.
Um, I kind of like forgot about him. I mean,
Yeah.
and looking at his numbers, like his production has been good. Like so in terms of like a comp, it looks good, but I don't I really don't know what to think of him. Does that
I mean, no, you're in the same spot that I was. But when I looked at the numbers, I was like, okay, this does make sense. And it's, again, logical to think this is like the kind of guy Ivy could turn into. All these other ones that we throw on him were like, well, the 3-point numbers even aren't that good, or like they're more of a point guard than a shooting guard. Sexton, same thing. He's more of a shooting guard than a point guard. I misspoke. Sexton was in the 2018 draft, not the 2020 draft. This is where everything gets all mixed up. He's been in the league 7 years. A guy that, again, is more of a scorer. Yes, he can pass, and yes, he has played point. And yes, they do still play him at point guard, but that is not his main role. He's mainly a scorer who can set up and do things running a second unit. But in as a starter, he's mainly been a shooting guard. The main difference between the two of them, which like might be the area where people fall apart, is like Sexton is way more prolific as a scorer in his first 3 years. I mean, 16.7 points per game as a rookie, 20.8 points per game as a second year player, and then third year in Cleveland, 24.3 points. So I think we forgot all about that. It's like Sexton really scored the rock those first 3 seasons. And Sexton has been a far superior 3-point shooter in terms of the percentages, 38.7%. I mean, there's only 1 year where he's dipped below 37% from three. Every other year is 37.1% or better. The last 3 seasons has been 39% or better, 39.3% or better from three. But I mean, take out those first 3 years in Cleveland, and then it's been like around 18 or fewer points per game. If you just isolate his play in Utah, 14.3 points per game. His first year there, 18.7. His second year, 18.4 points per game. Like that seems, again, like an Ivy thing. And the weird part too is like Sexton has always been really good from two. He really hasn't wasted shots from two either. Ever since his rookie year, his low, quote unquote, from two has been 50.1%. I mean, there are years where he's been 53% from 2-point range, 54% from 2-point range. And then Utah, he's been super efficient from 2-point range. He's been 52.7% these last 3 seasons from 2-point range in Utah. Same thing with Ivy, though, like 4.9 assists, 4.2 assists. So the first part of all this was like, okay, Sexton definitely had more on him as a scorer early on. Ivy has more on him as a playmaker early on. Ivy's not as good of a shooter, but when you dive in the advanced stats, and again, looking at that shot chart, it is the first part of like, okay, if Ivy's numbers ended up being average or some of the 3-point stuff came down, what do they look like? They look like that shot chart. Excuse me. Advanced numbers. This is the one that really blew my mind. Colin Sexton's 3-point attempt rate for his entire career is worse than Ivy. 26.7%. He really hasn't taken that many threes. And if you remember, Ivy's 3-point attempt rate is starting to trend up. And then honestly, Ivy's 3-point attempt rate has been better than Sexton's every single year, was in the mid 20s as a guy in Cleveland. And then his career high, quote unquote, 3-point attempt rate these last 2 seasons in Utah is 31.3%, which Ivy has cleared easily every single year that he's been with the Pistons. We can go back and look at that here in a second. And the other thing that Ivy clears Sexton on is the free throw attempt rate. Sexton averaged 29.8% across his entire 7-year career, but he's only had 2 seasons where it's been like, oh, it's noticeable. First year in Utah and then second, and then it kind of went back down to 29%. Again, all of this to me indicated like, okay, this is an Ivy type of guy where, yes, he can play the point guard. And if you look at the assist numbers, Ivy's already cleared him on that too. It really wasn't until these last 2 seasons when Sexton's 25 years old and 26 years old in Utah where it's been above 22.6%. Ivy still clears him there. His 3-point numbers are getting better, and his free throw generation is there. And again, the shot chart and the play style. Again, I looked at the stats, I looked at the shot chart, and then I went and looked at the film, and they all match up because you see Sexton doing the same kind of like off the ball movement stuff. He's not necessarily always the guy that needs to have the ball. He's doing a lot of stuff off the catch. He's doing a lot of things where somebody else will bring up the ball and he will finish. And just in where they get to on the court, I know they look very different doing it because obviously Ivy is super fast and will try and jam it more. But especially these, start from baseline in one of the corners and then run and do a curl or a pin down or stuff. Like Sexton did a lot of those things. A lot of times his instinct was to get to the rim, and same with an Ivy kind of thing. When they were given the ball, it was normally to run a second unit and stabilize there. And the 3-point shot, even though the 3-point shot is more prevalent for Ivy, like that's the difference between the two. Is Ivy's more willing to take them, even though he's not necessarily good at it yet, the way that Sexton is. But Sexton takes them more judiciously and knows like when he's going to hit them. And the main thing too, to look at the true shooting percentages. First year for Sexton, 52% true shooting. Second year, 56.0% true shooting. Then the third year, 57.3. That's pretty close to Ivy and how we've seen it track. And then every year since then, 52.3%. But then once he got to Utah and they didn't give him all the usage, and he's in this kind of a role where, again, mainly doing off ball stuff. Yes, given the reins for the second unit, I mean, he's been fantastic. His low and true shooting percentage has been 59.3%. This is where I ended up with Ivy. Is like, okay, I wanted to find an outcome that wasn't overly like, yeah, he's going to reach every single ceiling. He's going to finish at like 60% or better at the rim. His 3-point shot is going to be fantastic. It's going to be half of his offense. It's like, no, what does it look like when he still relies more on getting to the rim and his 2-point shot while also improving slightly from three, and then his free throw generation never really explodes the way that you want it to? I think it ends up a lot like this with Colin Sexton.
It's funny now looking at the information and thinking about him playing and comparing him to Ivy that this is a really good comp. Like, and seasons can go a couple of different ways and whatnot, but you could see the numbers being very, very similar. And even like looking contract wise, like I think Sexton's making like 18 or 19 million this year. And it's like, that's about the area we'd like to see Ivy at, is like a $20 million per year contract for like the role of what he's doing. And it's very realistic that these are the numbers he would produce and he would put up, and everyone would be happy with that. It's when everyone pictures him being much more and then deserving more money, where that's where we've just said paying him more money is the gamble. If, because I mean, just imagine if you sign Colin Sexton to like a 4 year, hundred some $1 million contract. Is that a contract you would want to get? I mean, with the cap going up, that's probably ballpark figure where he's going to be, but you start getting higher than that, and it's like, you don't want to give him that, you know?
Yeah, you already knew where I was going with this because the follow up to this is like, okay, if you believe he's Colin Sexton and you feel good in that, what do you pay him? Don't look at the numbers in terms of the contract, look at the percentage.
Yep.
And if you look at Colin Sexton's percentage of what like he was given with this contract, I believe it was Cleveland that signed him a deal, if I remember correctly. First year was 13.34% of the cap. Second year was 12.88% of the cap. Third year was 12.9%, and then the final year was 12.27% of the cap. Like that's probably where you're looking at with Ivy. The cap this year is like 154.6 million, if I remember correctly. So if you want to say, okay, what is 13, 14% of 154.6? You have any idea what that is? We'll round it up to 14 just to say, actually, you know what? Let's round this up to 15% because I think 15% is probably like what you and I would argue for with Ivy, right? Of like 15% of the cap. Then, if we really feel like the Colin Sexton can do off ball, on ball, run the second unit, is going to be efficient, we think it's 3 will round out. Even if the rim finishing still ends up being like 55%, 15% reasonable and maybe a little bit of an overpay, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like 22 million or something.
Yeah, so the 16.4 and 0.22. Yeah, it's around that. It's like 21, 22 million. Because when I looked at it at the 13.34 before, that ended up being 20 million, which is probably like if I were the GM, that's where I would start. It's like, okay, we'll give you 20 million in this. And if they could do a descending deal, because there have been teams that have been able to get that done, like Jalen Suggs' deal is a descending deal. Granted, I think he's making like 35 in the first year of it, but I think in this deal, the last year of it would be something like 27 million or whatever, and then it goes down from there, if I remember the numbers correctly. Again, if you're comfortable with Colin Sexton, again, it's not too wild of an outcome. It's not burying Ivy to be like, he's never going to shoot, or like, he's never going to, be a point guard that can handle second unit. But it's also not being like, yeah, every single outcome he's going to hit. I think 20 million is like where we're looking at with Ivy, unless this year plays out and he hits his highest end outcome. And who would his highest end outcome be, Eddie? To me, there's really only one name here.
Uh, Zach LaVine,
Boom, you got it. How did you know that?
because everyone talked about it all last year, trading for Zach LaVine.
Yeah, and I mean, look at Zach LaVine's first 3 years. Everybody forgets he was in Minnesota, but those were his first 3 years. 10.1 points per game as a first year player, 14 as a second year player, and then blew up to those 18.9 points per game in his third year. Probably had a little bit better of a jumper, if I'm being honest and remembering correctly. 34.1% as a rookie, 38.9% second year, and then 38.7% third year. And then really the fourth year is when Levine got injured and he kind of dealt with injuries the next few years. And it wasn't until his third season in Chicago, which was like his sixth year, I think, in the NBA, where like he really caught on and ended up being the 50-40 mid 80s guy from free throw line, hyper efficient, 3 level scorer, maybe more like 2.5 level scorer, for average around like 4.5 or more assists per game. Played mainly shooting guard, but can move over to point guard. Like this is the absolute highest end outcome for a Jaden Ivey, right? And even the defense, like he never became a good defender until, let's see, he's been in the league, I want to say like 9 years or something like that, 11 years. And he really didn't become a good defender until he went over to that Team USA, which is what, like in year 8 or something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that is the high end outcome. And I mean, his like last few seasons, like he is really can shoot the ball. I mean, I don't know what the odds are of Ivy ever shooting like that. Not to say that, he couldn't do it, but like that's and to do it for, multiple seasons where it wasn't just one season that he shot it well. He can shoot the ball. Um,
Yeah, Levine is like Jason Richardson, Vince Carter, where it's like, yes, they've always been fantastic dunk contest mega athletes, but they've always been good jump shooters too. Levine, in his case, it's like he wasn't really ever showcased, but it was clear he always worked on it. And by year three, I mean, his 3 point attempt rate was 43.7%. You're not taking almost half of your shots from three if you don't already have your jumper pretty much worked out. And by that point, too, people knew like, okay, he's going to be a good 3 point shooter. And so that's why Andy said like you can't really bet on it because Ivy hasn't displayed that yet, and it hasn't been a thing in his past where everybody's like, "Oh, look, his jumper's so pretty," but he's got to get more consistent at it. It's definitely not been pretty in his past.
and then the other thing which you mentioned is like Zach Levine, it took many seasons for him to become what he is, and that's what where people are concerned. Like, yeah, you trade away Ivy now, and then 3 seasons from now he could be, you know. But it also depends on is he going to have the role to develop into that? If it's like Cade primarily running the show with the ball, and that's why for me I think it makes sense having him be the backup point guard and staggering them because part of it is still developing the player because these guys are still far from finished products, and it's like, yeah, this would be a high end outcome. I don't, and again, this isn't to like knock Ivy in any way, but I don't think this is a likely outcome. Like, I would love to see it happen, but that's asking a lot.
Normally, I would say something. I say this a lot when it's like, sure, it can happen, but you don't bet on it. Normally, I would say like it's possible, but it's not probable. In this case, like it's still year three, so you really can't say that yet. It still is in the cards. It's just a little less likely than other ones. But it's one that I would feed of saying like, yes, this hope is still here. It's not like with the Duran one where you're like, oh, I think he'll be, a really good defender. It's like, no, I think these catastrophic numbers like really make it super hard. That was the one where I would say, yes, it's possible, but it's just not probable based off of what we have. Or like, Stu being a double monster again, just based off the offensive numbers we have, would be like, yes, it's possible, but it's not probable. With Ivy, the main thing, thanks to cleaning the glass, we have these lineup, let's see, positions, excuse me. They call it positions for each player. They give you a year by year breakdown of like, okay, how much of their time did they spend at the different positions on the court? What do the differentials and stuff look like? And with Ivy, like if you look at these first 2 years, I mean, it's pretty brutal and catastrophic. Like he's bad on both sides of the court, even though he's producing. Guess who's also bad and brutal on both sides of the court here? If you're not watching this on YouTube, Levine and Ivy are both in like single digit percentiles in terms of differential, super inefficient on offense. The defense looks catastrophic and like unplayable in the 20s and again, single digits. And then by the third year, I mean, Levine didn't even play point guard, whereas Ivy has that a little bit there. And then if you just keep going further in on Levine's career, his first year in Chicago, again, similarly really dismal numbers. None of these indicate positive stuff. Second year in Chicago, it's like, okay, when he's playing small forward, like these numbers actually look more positive and it seems to be turning around. Third year in Chicago, it still looks pretty much like it's going nowhere. But then by the fourth year, this is where the numbers start to indicate like, oh, look, he's really good when he's playing point guard and small forward. And there's where things start to turn around. So that's why I say this is one that I would feed of like being probable. Because if you look at Levine's efficiency and like it's a lot of what people knocked him for and said like, ah, he's not worth a max contract and blah blah blah, because they looked at a lot of these advanced numbers and they were still very much like, yeah, he's giving too much away on defense, and like, I don't know if he's taking the right kind of shots and stuff. But over time, he proved himself to be a very reliable scorer. He proved himself to be somebody who would take the other side of the ball more seriously, and ended up being a very good player that like we would want on this team. Again, Ivy's only in the third year. Um, the last thing I want to end on with Ivy too is looking at these lineup positions, I should say position, because the lineup thing is the next thing I want to look at. This is the first year where Ivy really got more time at point guard. Let me try and go back on this. So 897 minutes is what cleaning the glass tracked. If you look at Ivy's totals, though, he played 898 minutes. So he played 1 minute at small forward, which, if you can see here, was 1% of his time, which cleaning the glass doesn't really track. So if you're like, how come it's only 897? Cleaning the glass doesn't count that 1 minute that he played at small forward, because obviously that doesn't tell you anything about his game. So in those 897 minutes, 60% of the time he was at shooting guard, and then 39% he was at point guard. I mean, they're both bad here in terms of the offense. It's better at shooting guard, where he's like in the 51 percentile in points per 100 possessions, only in the 29th percentile in points per 100 possession when he's at point guard, 63rd percentile when he's at shooting guard and effective field goal percentage, and then 32nd percentile when he's at point guard. So those are two things that are pretty bad. And again, this is the most Zach LaVine part of the development track, which is what I want to end on. Would still give Ivy hope of like, one day he definitely could come within there. The other thing to look at is the lineup data. There was one lineup that was clear, like far and above Ivy's best lineup, and that was with Kate at the point guard, Ivy at the shooting guard, Malik Beasley at the small forward, Tobias Harris at power forward, and then Jalen Duren at center. That had an 85th percentile in terms of differential. And the funny thing is, you would think that that lineup would be really good on offense, because you had Cade, Ivy, Beasley, Tobias, Duren. Like, they're all good offensive guys, right? No, it actually kind of sucked on offense. 48th percentile in points per 100 possession. They're at least above average in effective field goal percentage, 61% in the 61 percentile effective field goal percentage. But this was an elite defensive unit, 94th percentile on defense in points per 100 possession, 92nd in effective field goal percentage. The bad news is that's only 128 possessions. Ivy had 1,821, so that's roughly like 13% of his possessions. And again, it was only in 30 games, so it's not a lot of sample to work with. But these are some glimmers to indicate like there are positive things in here. And believe it or not, so I've gone through and looked at the lineup data for a lot of these Piston guys, and mainly for the core: Cade, Ivy, Asar, Duren, Stu, and Ron Holland. And this is going to be a running theme, because when we go through these episodes and give like what can these individual players do and what do we expect from them, the running theme so far is that there are a lot of these guys, regardless of whether they're thought of as offensive players, that they have really good defensive on-off numbers in these lineup ones, of like, this lineup looks really good on defense. And a running theme for me with everybody is like, this Piston squad needs to lean into defense, man. In that Cade, Ivy, Beasley, Tobias, Duren, you know what it makes me say again and again and again, Andy, this coming season, what do they ought to do?
Start Duncan Robinson.
Bingo. And again, that's going to be a running theme, because a lot of these lineups, the two shooters, like last year it was Timmy and Beasley, a lot of the good lineups have both of those guys in them. And again, a lot of those same lineups are really good on defense. So they should lean into this defensive identity and put shooters here, man.
That was a lot of interesting numbers. And the thing that I would also add, because you think it's more probable than most people would think for Ivy to progress and look more like LaVine, is Ivy's career has been he's had a difficult career, I guess you could say, to start in terms of Cade was hurt, so we got to see him in a role without Cade, and then we had the worst season we could probably ever imagine from just a coaching dysfunction standpoint. And then he is having a good season and he gets hurt. It's like, if you take that all into account, the numbers he's put up are pretty good for what he's been involved with, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the other thing that I forgot to bring up here with Ivy is when you look at the effective field goal percentage, when he's at point guard, it's 52.6%. But when he's at shooting guard, if you remember, I said he was in the 63rd percentile, it's 55.5% effective field goal percentage when Jaden Ivey's at shooting guard. So I was like, I wonder what kind of player that looks like. So I went to basketball reference and just looked at effective field goal percentage and was like, okay, who's shooting like 55, around 55% effective field goal percentage? So the guys we got at a 55% effective field goal percentage: Kobe White, Denny Avdia, Najee Marshall, Jalen Brunson, Tamani Kamara, Naz Reid, Austin Reeves, Jonas Valanciunas, Victor Wembanyama, and OG Anunoby. Two of those guys like scream to me these are good, at least in terms of role in production. Ivy comps. One is Tamani Kamara, who another guy who's getting better as a 3-point shooter, and his free throw percentage 72.2%. Because some of these, like the Austin Reeves, like obviously we're not going to say that Ivy could ever be Austin Reeves. I mean, if you wanted to just boil it down to one specific stat, it's the free throws. I mean, he generates so many free throws, Austin Reeves, and he shoots 87.7%. So it's like, okay, when you round out the true shooting percentage and stuff, Austin Reeves is going to be far superior. Whereas Ivy, we said before, mid 70s free throw shooter. So Tamani Kamara, burgeoning 3-point shooter, more taking shots from two, very good athlete, and then 72.2% from the free throw line. So it's like, okay, we see pretty similar shooting splits for an Ivy, 54.2% for Tamani Kamara from two, 37.5% from three, and then 72.2% from the free throw line. What true shooting percentage does that equal out to? Is 57.2%. It's like, okay, if Ivy maintains those shooting splits from two and three, and then that's probably going to be his free throw percentage. This is what we're looking at in terms of true shooting, is around 57%, which is what we kind of thought of before anyways, what we said in the last episode, right? It's like, yeah, if these numbers maintain and he gets even a little better, that's what it is. And the other guy is Najee Marshall. So Najee Marshall, very different role, but imagine Ivy's 3-point shot is 27.5%, which is what Najee Marshall's is. 81.3% from the free throw line, and then 61.1% from 2-point range. You know, we don't believe Ivy's going to ever shoot 61.1% from 2-point range, but we don't think he's going to shoot that low, 27.5%. And then the 81.3, like all the other shooting splits would probably kind of balance out, like 33%, a little high 70s, 50, whatever, and not as limited. And Najee Marshall's true shooting percentage, 58.4%, despite having terrible 3-point numbers. So if Ivy can just maintain that, and really this is my argument for like, stop playing Ivy at point guard. It is affecting his efficiency. That's for certain. I mean, I know they're going to continue to play Ivy at point guard. It's what they want, but it also means by like the Zach LaVine thing. Zach LaVine got better because they stopped having him play point guard, right? Lonzo Ball made that Bulls team work, and he's the guy that everybody from DeMar to the GM to Billy Donovan to Zach LaVine says, like, man, if Lonzo didn't get hurt, like this whole thing works. Like that's what it still screams with Ivy. And luckily, they still have a Cade Cunningham. It still does make me think, what in the world is Karis LeVert doing here on this team, and like have an actual point guard alongside Ivy? Because again, the early numbers at least indicate that he's going to be good and be way more efficient at shooting guard. So that's another glimmer of hope for Zach LaVine, while also still maintaining like this guy can be Colin Sexton and have a very good efficiency from 2-point range while still maintaining this role of like coming off the bench, but mostly being at shooting guard and getting better from three. And even if his numbers don't drastically increase the rim like a Colin Sexton's, he can still be hyper efficient.
So this takes us off on a tangent, but you brought the player up. Anytime I hear Tamani Kamara brought up, I think about when you first told me about him and you were like, this guy is going to be a steal in the second round for whoever gets him. And every time his name pops up and people are like talking so good about him, I'm like, Steve was so right on that call. That was such a good call.
Yeah, if only, if only. I mean, I don't know why teams didn't draft him higher either. It was one of those like the Herb Jones thing again. It's like it indicates this guy's really good, and you just don't see that kind of an athlete fall that far in the draft either. So yeah, it is what it is. Andy, do you have anything to say before we get out of here?
You did a lot of work, man. Like this was a lot, and it was it was good in terms of, I guess, comforting. Like, worst case scenario, and I think most people already thought this, Jaden Ivey will be a good professional basketball player at the
Yeah.
two guard.
Yeah.
Um, and really it comes down to the contract that the Pistons sign him to, because he could end up signing a deal that it ends up 3 seasons from now is like part of their success, because it was a good enough price that he's playing way beyond that value, or he's, at that value. Um, Worst case scenario, they sign him to a bigger number than we feel, comfortable with. And it's like paying that much money for Karis LeVert or Cole Anthony, and you're like, yeah, that didn't work out, which wouldn't kill your team, but it's not going to give you the opportunity to really take advantage. Because like even some of these teams like Indiana, who's had a good run for 2 seasons, they've got a lot of players on the outside of their main two guys who they got way more production than what they were paying them. And you really have to do, and that's, Oklahoma City's success is based on that. Now they're going to be paying the price, and we'll see how long they keep it together. But you need to get more production than what you're paying for if you want to make a good run.
Yeah, and with Ivy too, the Colin Sexton thing, like I like Colin Sexton. I'm not gonna lie, but at the same time, it's like it really there's a reason why Cleveland traded off of him. Again, he's not necessarily bad, but then his value now was such that I guess Utah needed to attach a pick to him to trade him to Charlotte, right? It's weird. But the main thing with Ivy too, when I came down to that, is like I really don't see him being worse than like a Karis LeVert. Like I did look at guys considered bust and whatever, and I'm like, man, all those guys either clearly didn't work at their game, or by year three, like they just didn't show. And like the character with Ivy is such that like you just don't see this guy falling off in terms of work ethic and making it work. Maybe again, like the 3-point shot doesn't ever come around because that is something to you just can't say it's going to absolutely 100% happen if they haven't been a jump shooter all their life. And but when I settled on the Sexton thing too, looking at the film and everything and being like, yeah, he's a net overall positive. What we said last time, like what they sign him and Duran to are really going to make and break. But at the other end of it is like, okay, say he is Sexton and he gets that like 15% deal. Sexton did help Cleveland take the next step because he's a useful player that they packaged together to go get Donovan Mitchell. And every single trade we've seen where a team gets another major upgrade from AD to the Donovan Mitchell trade, you know, it's because that team had multiple useful players. Again, you however you want to define that, because they didn't necessarily have the superstar, but they were able to package guys together that not only had the contract, but had the game to where you're like, okay, I can bring these guys in and they're not just salary filler. They're actually pretty good, like Laurie Markkinen and Colin Sexton packaged together along with those picks to get Donovan Mitchell. That's definitely something the Pistons have to do going forward. It's like we still know both Duran and Ivy are useful, but you can't throw all the money at them to where, like Andy just said, the price point is such that either you can't package them together with a bunch of other guys and picks, or like the number is like, all right, this guy's making too much and it's a negative asset. We just don't see the return on it.
And as negative as I may have sounded during this podcast, like I'm a huge Jaden Ivey fan for everything he has been through in Detroit, like the time with Monty Williams, like he handled everything like a pro. His personality and his work ethic, he is not someone I would bet against. He is someone that I would love to see here because I just think he's going to work for it and he wants it and he wants to be here. So don't don't let my negativity fool you. Like I believe in the kid.
Yeah, and again, the main difference between where I was really this close to pulling the trigger on the Cole Anthony comp, but then the more I watched the film, the more I'm like, Ivy is unselfish. If anything else, like a lot of the guys they have on this team, Duncan, Karras, no matter else what you want to say about them, you cannot walk away from their film and not say, oh, this is an unselfish dude that's trying to make everybody better, which absolutely is what Ivy's doing. And I think that just fits in on everybody, even Duran, like who obviously I am not a big fan of. I would never call him selfish because he consistently is trying to work on the passing and getting other guys involved. So that is a nice thing to see that. And again, I'm with Andy here. I wasn't the biggest Jaden Ivey fan, but the more you watch him, the more you see like he puts in the time. The game is slowly turning around, and these kind of things don't happen overnight. So I think Jaden Ivey is really going to end up being like a Karis LeVert with the possibility that the Zach Levine type outcome is not out of the question. That's just going to take 4 or 5 years the way it did for Zach. So, Andy, do you have anything else to say before we get out of here?
Nope. Good work, my friend. Well done.
Oh, you think the work is done? It is not done yet because next time we're going to look at a star. I have no idea. I'm not going to, this is just walking in the dark with no flashlight and no shoes. Who knows where this is going to come because Asar is the biggest wild card for next season, determining whether this is a team that takes a step back, spins its wheels, or takes a big leap forward. Because there are guys like Zach Lowe out there who's saying, I think Asar is going to take a giant leap forward, but then they don't follow it up with how it's going to happen. I want to try and answer of like, okay, how is this going to happen? So who knows? Next time, hear me fumble all the way through the Asar Thompson projection while Andy hops you along. So yeah, thank you so much for listening to us. Andy, let everybody know where they can find you before we get out of here.
You can find me on Twitter at D_D_Pistons_fan.
Asar, here we come. Hold on.